What is up, guys? It's your boy Rick Kakis, and today we've got some brand spanking new Destiny 2 news, courtesy of the Bungie weekly update that has just gone live, revealing official information. And so, let's get started. Now sit back, relax, grab some popcorn, because we're gonna be here for a while. A Bungie community manager said that this was one of the largest TWABs ever written, with over 9,000 words on the huge topic of weapon balancing in the sandbox and the changes coming in the upcoming seasons. So let's first start with what's going on this week in Destiny 2. But just before we do, hey, look at me! Now look at your balls. No, not my balls, you look at your balls. That's because April is National Testicular Cancer Awareness Month, and today's sponsor Manscaped has partnered with the Testicular Cancer Society to bring awareness of this huge issue, guys. One man every hour, every single day is diagnosed with testicular cancer. Now, Manscaped makes a ton of fantastic male grooming products, like the Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer. I use this thing all the time, and my wife's been stealing it and using it too, actually, to the Crop Mop Refreshing Ball Wipes. But here's the thing, while you're freshening up, you can head to manscaped.com/TCS to learn how to give yourself a simple self-examination at the same time to prevent against testicular cancer. So guys, click the link in the description down below. You're gonna get 20% off Manscaped products, free shipping, and you can join the fight against testicular cancer. Definitely worth your time to click the link in the description down below. Alright, now as for what's going on this week, first off, there's actually double Nightfall rewards live right now, and the Glassway is the featured Grandmaster. Now, the Glassway has a bad reputation from when it was one of the hardest Grandmasters in the game last time it was around, but honestly, this season, I didn't find it too bad. So definitely check out my guide on how to beat it, some recommended loadouts, because it is really not out of the realm of possibility to farm the GM this week, especially with those hot double drops. And the Silicon Necroma that's dropping has some pretty good rolls. Now, aside from that, the other big thing to happen this week is the launch of the Master Difficulty Vow of the Disciple raid. And unfortunately, that was an utter disaster. Essentially, the Adept loot that's dropping from that raid, well, the weapons can't get enhanced perks. So if you look at the normal mode loot that you craft yourself, arguably the version with 2 enhanced perks that you craft is better than the version that can get, what, an Adept mod? Like, is plus 10 stability from an Adept mod better than 2 enhanced perks? Often not. So the one of the hardest pinnacle endgame activities in the game is dropping arguably worse loot than the normal version. Obviously, players are very upset. It's a big issue. Hopefully, Bungie can find a way to kind of rebalance endgame content with the existence of weapon crafting. Because you got to remember, like, this formula, that it's basically a copy and paste formula from when Vault of Glass arrived, like, this was all before weapon crafting was a thing. So obviously, with this new addition, things are going to have to change. All right, now on to the new information within the TWAB. Bungie staff designer Chris Proctor lays out some goals for Sandbox tuning coming in Season 17. So specifically saying in Season 17, the Sandbox team is making changes across all aspects of the Sandbox to improve the player experience of PvP. Here are some of the team's goals to support that. So I'm just going to go over the main goals. So firstly, introduce levers to tune how players build for Airborne gameplay. Secondly, allow players to mitigate for Flinch. Then we've got reduce the number of one-hit kills in PvP. And lastly, address common feedback on weapons across all game modes. And of course, you can pause and read the further explanations. So first off, involving glaives. So, right here is all of the changes made this season to glaives already. You can see a lot of bug fixes, but also some buffs, especially reaching maximum energy with 4 shots instead of 6. But coming in Season 17, here are more changes being made to glaives. So Bungie says, we're pushing glaives deeper into their roles of hard-hitting melee damage and near complete protection when shielded, as well as increasing projectile speed to make them more reliable at range. So
Note that the glaive shield grants 97.5 damage resistance in PvE and 75% in PvP. So they've increased the melee damage versus PvE enemies, except for bosses and vehicles, by 25%. They've reduced the energy drain speed while shielded by 30%, so your shield is going to last significantly longer. They increase the projectile speed dependent on the range stat. So at 0 range stat, they increase it from 30 to 60, so that's double, and at 100 range stat, increased from 80 to 100. So pretty big changes there. Definitely expect glaives to be significantly more reliable and hard-hitting coming next season. But that's actually not all. Specifically for the exotic glaives, they're getting individual buffs. So the Titan Glaive Edge of Action, players now gain a Void Overshield while inside the bubble. Helm of Saint 14 now applies to this bubble as it does Ward of Dawn. So that's definitely some build crafting right there. For the Warlock Glaive, they increase the speed and acceleration of the healing turret projectiles, and for the Hunter Glaive, they've tripled the damage of the wave detonation, and they increase the number of enemies it can chain to from 4 to 8. So those are some pretty significant increases. We're going to have to retest and reuse those exotic glaives next season. But moving on from there, Bungie talks about Flinch. Now, Flinch is a huge part of any shooter. It's when you get shot, your aim will bounce around because of that, making it harder for you to hit your shots. So, what Bungie has actually done is they say we've rebuilt the stability weapon stat to grant flinch resistance in addition to its other effects, with a maximum flinch resistance of 10% to 25% dependent on the weapon archetype. So this will actually allow you, if you're annoyed by flinch, if you're like, I always lose gunfights because of flinch, you want to look for weapons with huge stability stats. You want to specifically go for perks that grant more stability, put on that adept stability mod, all of that stuff. So here is the breakdown of the flinch resistance with 100 stability. So if you have completely maxed out stability on auto rifles, submachine guns, and bows, you get 25% more flinch resistance. For pulse rifles, scout rifles, sidearms, and machine guns, 20%. Then 15% for hand cannons and trace rifles, and 10% for fusion rifles, shotguns, snipers, grenade launchers, both breach and drum, linear fusions, both special and heavy versions, and rocket launchers. They say note that stability stat of below 20 will technically have a small flinch resistance penalty, but only around 5 weapons have a stability stat, that low to actually be in that range. In addition to that, guys, another interesting change is the resilience stat for your character that normally grants more health and the Titan class ability. Now that is also going to impact your flinch resistance. So it's going to be 0% at 0 resilience, and at 100 resilience, you have an extra 10% flinch resistance. So you're actually able to stack stability, resistance, as well as other weapon perks that reduce flinch, and they give some examples here. So a 100 stability Suros pulse rifle with that Suros origin perk, 10 resilience, no distractions, and unflinching pulse rifle. You combine all these things, you get a 90% flinch resistance. That's actually insane. So definitely it seems like some reductions to flinch across the board, and again allowing you to hone that resistance if you really are annoyed by it. Moving on from there, guys, we have some changes to Airborne gunplay. Now, Bungie says before getting into build crafting, they've made some fundamental changes. So firstly, your primary weapons will have less randomness in projectile accuracy in most cases, but you'll have less aim assistance instead, and will need to be precise in your aiming to land your shots without building heavy into Airborne. So that's a pretty big change. Right now, when you jump in the air, your bullets will just randomly go around your enemies. But now you're going to have to actually aim. You won't get as much bullet magnetism and all of that stuff, but there'll be less randomness. I think already that's a great change. But even more so than that, Bungie is adding a new weapon stat, Airborne Effectiveness, which is present on all weapons except those where being airborne doesn't have an effect, like swords, for example. And here is what the Airborne effectiveness stat means. So with little to no investment, so 0 to 30 Airborne stat, you will have a smaller accuracy penalty than retail, but significantly lower aim assist. With 31 to 50, you'll have around the same in-air accuracy as Icarus equipped weapons do currently, but with noticeably lower aim assist. With 51 to 70, you'll have better accuracy than retail weapons with Icarus, with fewer misses due to randomness, but reduced aim assist. 71 to 99, you're going to have no airborne accuracy penalty at all, and a very slight reduction to aim assist. And with 100 airborne stat, a character will have no airborne accuracy penalties and the same aim assist as if you're on the ground. So, literally just like how there's a range stat and a stability stat, apparently there's just going to be an airborne effectiveness stat on every weapon now, that potentially there's going to be, perks and mods to augment that so that you can literally be jumping around and winning gunfights midair. Bungie says this stat has been hand-tuned on all exotic weapons, everything that shipped in Season 16 or 17, and everything that's ever shipped as Trials or Nightfall loot, but older legendary weapons have a default value set per weapon archetype to a value just below the middle of the allowed range stats. But there is actually an important note. This will be a hidden stat. So I guess you won't actually be able to see it, below the range stat or anything like that. You will have to look in an API like light.gg to see airborne accuracy, just like how there's recoil direction and all of that stuff. It is a stat that's coming, but again, it won't be as obvious right in the big weapon stats. So I'm just going to leave this here. You guys can pause and read if you want to, but of course, this new stat is going to influence a lot of other aspects of airborne gunplay, aim assist, cones and angles for primaries, specials, and so on. Of course, those are going to be dependent on how high that airborne accuracy stat is. We've got headshot aim assistance, we've got pellet shotgun spread angle, and so on. Moving on from there, Bungie says, what this means overall is that you'll get fewer misses due to randomness from the accuracy cone while airborne, but reliance on aiming will be much higher at a low stat. So this is actually the kind of before and after examples of the accuracy cone penalty for hand cannons and sniper rifles, as you can see. So Bungie continues, the airborne effectiveness stat comes from 3 sources: weapon, subclass, and armor. So when it comes to the weapon, the base airborne effectiveness stat with ranges varying from 0 to 10, 0 to 30, depending on the weapon archetype. Then exotic weapons have typically been bumped up and have higher airborne effectiveness stats than the legendary versions of their archetypes. The Icarus Grip Adept weapon mod will grant plus 15 to this stat. Certain weapon perks, such as the redesigned Air Assault, which is probably coming back in Season 17. And here is a big list of all of the different stat ranges for all of the different types of weapons. So, fusion rifles can only get that 10 rank, so they can't be super effective in air, but something like sidearms can go all the way to 30. Bungie says higher tier weapons in those archetypes like Trials, Raid, and Nightfall stuff will be higher than those values, and we have some examples here of exotic weapon outliers. So Sweet Business is actually really good in air accuracy. Skyburner's Oath, Rat King, Huckleberry, all insane. Chaperone, not too insane, already pretty cracked, in air, didn't need to be any better. And we've also got some hand-tuned legendary values right here. So something like the Hung Jury and the Igneous Hammer have really good in-air accuracy. Submission especially really good. Now, as for subclasses that can affect in-air accuracy, Heat Rises grants plus 70, the Tempered Metal ability plus 20, and the Whisper of Hedron's Fragment plus 20. Now, moving on from there, for exotic armor, that is going to provide different bonuses and so on, and here are all of them, right? So obviously for Mechaneer's Trick Sleeves, it's all about sidearms, so it's going to give plus 50 to sidearms in-air accuracy. So again, take a look at all of these. Peacekeepers for SMGs, Lion Rampart, hipfire only, some very interesting effects there. So potentially if you're going for an in-air accuracy build, you got to look at something, heck, like the Peacekeepers, like the Trick Sleeves, that's going to provide, like the Wings of Sacred Dawn actually, that's going to provide those huge in-air accuracy bonuses. You also probably noticed Stompies gets minus 50, so that's going to matter quite a bit. Moving on from there, guys, Bungie says we're going to be monitoring how it rolls out and expect us to make adjustments. For fun, here are some graphs showing the most used armor exotics across each class. So, for Hunter, Stompies absolutely massively blows everything else away. Then for the Titan here, it's actually relatively even across the board, a lot of different variety here. Then for the Warlock, Ophidian Aspect blows everything completely out of the water right here. And then I think that other big chunk is Phoenix Protocol. So definitely some interesting graphs right there. And it's going to be interesting to see, like, now mobility in terms of airborne accuracy, it's spread across a bunch of different exotics, so can't wait to see how that pans out. But guys, moving on from that massive discussion on airborne gunplay, Bungie next talks about playlist weapons. So here are the current ones. They drop from Crucible, Gambit, and Strikes. They're intended to give some interesting loot to players grinding those activities, but there's going to be some changes made. So firstly, playlist weapons now have a chance to roll with extra traits in one or both columns, increasing with the number of rank resets with that vendor in a given season. So they say, note, reputation resets each season, so you'll need to play these activities in each season to unlock those extra perks. So if you're going after, right now the Strike Soro Shotgun actually has some pretty saucy rolls. Next season when this is implemented, if you're going after that, you grind strikes over and over again, you rank up and reset it quite a few times, you're going to be getting, 2 extra perks in those main columns to make it significantly easier to farm. Another big change here, guys, all playlist weapons from Beyond Light and later will drop with the appropriate origin trait. So obviously there's like a Vanguard exclusive trait where every time you get a kill you get a little bit of health. There's that Crucible exclusive origin trait, and all the old weapons are, outright worse because they don't have any origin traits, but now those are going to be applied to those older weapons. So stuff like the Empty Vessel, breech-loaded grenade launcher from Strikes that's still dropping, that's now going to get, that Vanguard origin trait. So that's actually a big buff for a lot of those weapons, and it might be time to go back and farm these evergreen activities. But next up, guys, we have another big discussion with some big changes, and this is one-hit kills and special ammo within PvP. So they say right now, there's a lot of things that can buff your damage, allowing stuff like La Monarch, Ariana's Vow to one-shot in PvP. So, one of the big changes coming is that they've reduced the damage bonus for Empowering Rift, High Energy Fire, and Inertia Override from 20% to 15% against players. So, no effect in PvE, but yeah, standing in an Empowering Rift with your La Monarch might not be able to get those one-shots anymore. Now, in addition to that, for special weapons, they've disabled the ammo scavenger armor mods in PvP. So, no matter how much an enemy player is carrying, and again, your scavenger mods will do nothing, you're going to pick up 1 brick for shotguns and snipers and so on. And if you're using something like a Forerunner or a Trace Rifle, you're going to get about 1 kill's worth of ammo, according to Bungie. And they've also retuned several special weapon archetypes and exotics with the general goal of reducing the effectiveness and uptime of special weapons. So here's actually the chart here of special weapon usage. You can see shotguns and fusion rifles are a huge chunk. Sniper rifles coming in third. Grenade launchers see actually very little play. Linear fusion rifles see basically 0 play. So what Bungie is doing is all special weapons have had their in-air accuracy significantly reduced. While we are okay with encouraging players to build around primary weapons, we do not believe in a prevalence of airborne one-hit kill options is good for PvP. So special weapons have a slightly larger airborne accuracy penalty than primaries at 0 airborne effectiveness, and it's reduced to 0 at 100% stat. And special weapons have a similar airborne aim assist cone penalty to other weapons, around 50% at 0 stat, and this penalty can be reduced but not entirely removed by investing in airborne effectiveness. Sniper rifles are fairly slow to ready and stow and aim down sights, which has made snapshot feel mandatory for many players. So Bungie's actually reduced the stow, ready, and aim down sights times by 10%, so all snipers are now snappier, and also sniper rifles have less access to ammo than shotguns and fusion rifles, where kills drop ammo right in front of you, so we think the scarcity will prevent snipers from spiking in usage. Moving on from there, let's talk shotguns. So this is actually a usage chart of all the different archetypes of shotguns. You can see aggressive frames, see a lot of play, lightweight frames, see a ton of play, and so on. So Bungie says slug and pellet shotguns are still overwhelmingly popular in PvP despite some recent changes, so some more changes. They've reduced the damage fall off start and end by 1 meter, and they've reduced the aim assistance and magnetism fall off start and end by 2 meters. So they also say fusion rifle usage is also trending pretty darn high, especially in trials, and bringing shotguns a little bit down more, but they say with these changes, 20 meters plus fusion rifle one-hit kills should be very uncommon. So they've reduced the damage fall off near distance, and they've also reduced the damage fall off far distance, and they've reduced the recoil scalar variance between 0 and 100 stability. And you can see the specific things there. So fusion rifles, a little bit of a nerf to rein them in. In fact, speaking of, here is the fusion rifle usage chart. So you can see like likely suspect, main ingredient, sorry, seeing a ton of play. And deliverance, obviously, you can see like when it comes out and as it goes forward, kind of interesting there. But Bungie is making even more changes to fusions depending on their archetypes. So for high impacts that are seeing basically no play right now, the unmodified high impact charge time is 1 second right now. It's going down to 0.96 seconds, and they've increased the damage per burst by 10. Also for precision frames, increased the charge time from 0.74 to 0.78, so a little bit slower. Rapid fires are going from 0.46 to 0.5, and they've decreased the damage per burst by 20 because rapid fires are seeing a ton of play, and the new charge times are as follows. So high impacts, 0.96, 330 damage, precisions 0.78, 280. Adaptives are actually unchanged, so those are probably worth looking into, and rapid fires a little bit slower and a little bit less damage. Moving on from there, guys, there's actually a big buff coming for trace rifles. So firstly, they've increased the trace rifle damage against non-red bar combatants by 20%. So if you're fighting bosses, yellow bars, champions, you're doing 20% more. That's a big increase, right? Like that's basically a free, always active focus fire on every single trace rifle in the game in PvE. I'm very interested by that. Also, they've increased the ammo pickup per special brick from 18 to 30 to help them probably more in PvP. Moving on from there, guys, primary weapons. So firstly, auto rifles, Bungie says they're not that competitive in mid-range, so they're increasing the damage fall-off near distance by 0.75 meters. Not sure how much of a difference that's going to make, but for pulse rifles, they've increased the damage fall off near distance based on the range stat. So 0 range, they've increased it from 15 to 16 meters, 100 range, 22.5 to 24 meters. The damage fall off far distance remains 40 meters regardless of the range stat, and they've increased the lightweight pulse rifle damage per bullet from 15 to 16. And with a 1.65 precision scaler, the precision damage is going from 24.75 to 26. So they say this won't change the optimal time to kill in PvP, but will reduce the number of crits required. So maybe it's time to break out some lightweights next season. Now, as for submachine guns, Bungie says zoom is too important of a factor on submachine guns, and submachine guns with low zoom don't feel competitive in PvP. So what they're doing is that they've increased the damage falloff by 1.5 meters, and they've adjusted the zoom values on most viable legendary SMGs and one exotic. So the Shair's Wrath is going from 17 to 16, multi-mac with the max scope zoom 17 to 15, Scholastic Variable going up to 14. You can see all the changes there. Huckleberry going up to 15 is pretty interesting. Now for adaptive submachine guns, Bungie says in their current form, they kill a little too fast with body shots, so we've reduced body damage to increase their body shot time to kill by 1 bullet without impacting their optimal time to kill. So body shot damage going down from 12 to 11.5, but they actually increased the precision multiplier from 1.35 to 1.44, which does mean as long as you get some headshots, you can get a couple of body shots. Because the headshots are going to be doing a little bit more damage, you should still get that optimal time to kill. Then for precision frame hand cannons that have not seen play for forever, Bungie says they have always been good while Airborne, effectively having built-in Icarus. And with the changes they've made to the Airborne gunplay we've talked earlier, what they're actually doing is the intrinsic perk switched from a 75% Airborne accuracy penalty reduction to a plus 25% Airborne effectiveness stat. So that means if you have a Frontier's Cry with Icarus grip, you'll be at 59 Airborne effectiveness before you even touch your, subclass or your armor or anything. So could this actually finally get precisions to see a little bit more play? Maybe. Next up, we have heavy weapons. Firstly, machine guns still aren't where we want them to be in PvE. They actually did get a recent buff, so they're better than usual, but they're actually getting another buff. So they've increased the damage by 40% against PvE enemies, but only 20% against bosses, because they say if it was 40% against bosses, like, they'd be pretty insane for boss DPS. And specifically the Xenophage and the Grand Overture received this buff except for the bonus to bosses, which does mean something like the Thunderlord, which actually has, not bad DPS, is going to be doing 20% more damage against bosses, 40% more against all PvE enemies. Could we finally see machine guns being viable in endgame content? I'm very excited by this, guys. 40% is huge. Like 40% against champions, against every yellow bar you see, and then 20% still against bosses? Yeah, I'm whipping out the machine guns next season. Also, swords have been inconsistent for a while now, so we've tidied these up mostly cosmetically. So they fixed several inconsistencies in stat display between different swords. They've also increased the charge rate of the Soul of Scar from 20 to 50 to match the Temptation's hook. Also, for the rocket launcher subfamilies, they weren't differentiated enough by the previous change, so here's what's happening. So for precisions, they get minus 10% damage, so both impact and detonation. So obviously with the payoff of having built-in tracking, that's the drawback. High impacts, no change, and that's the subfamily with the highest blast radius. And adaptive and aggressive are getting plus 10% damage. So stuff like the Hothead, that's going to be hitting even harder and is definitely going to be worth looking at next season. Moving on from there, for exotics. So Bungie says all exotics that shipped before the Forsaken release now have their kill trackers visible by default. The Fighting Lion needed a bit of a buff, so we've improved the reload speed. They've actually reverted the Season 15 Breach Grenade Launcher blast radius reduction, but just for Fighting Lion, and they've increased the blast radius by 0.4 meters, and they've increased the damage by 5%. God, I already like the Fighting Lion. The Fighting Lion with volatile rounds and stuff is so much fun right now. You've got to try it out, and this makes it even better. Next up, Eyes of Tomorrow as a raid exotic should probably be better, so they've increased the damage versus bosses and champions by 30%. That's pretty significant. The eyes is no joke. Moving on from there, the Leviathan's breath always felt like it should absolutely wreck champions, and it really doesn't. So what's actually happening is that the Archer's Tempo perk from the Catalyst now has increased effect. So just on this weapon, the standard draw time scaler for Archer's Tempo is 0.75 times, and now it's 0.5625 times on the Leviathan's breath. So you're going to be drawing and shooting even faster with the Catalyst equipped. They've added a small delay before the detonation on champions, mini bosses, and bosses. This allows the impact to stun an unstoppable champion and then the detonation to deal bonus damage against the stunned champion. And also the damage changed to be more evenly split between impact and detonation by around 50%. So overall, damage versus champions is roughly doubled, even more compared to shooting an unstunned, unstoppable champion. So that's actually a pretty big change there. Maybe Leviathan's Breath will actually be worth using in stuff like Grandmasters moving forward. Also, the Huckleberry, they increased the zoom stat. We already talked about that. And Xenophage, their experiment of pushing it into a slower firing and harder hitting weapon didn't really pan out. So they've increased the rate of fire from 100 back to 120. And the damage is going up to where it was before this nerf. And it doesn't benefit from the damage buff against bosses, but it does against champions and everything else. So pretty sweet still. Now the Luminarch, Bungie says, is too oppressive against other players, so they've reduced the poison tick damage versus players by 25%. They've changed the poison damage type from burn to poison, largely housekeeping, not gameplay significant right now, but I bet those poison subclasses are coming next big DLC. And they've increased the poison tick damage versus AI by 50%, so actually big buff for PvE. The Lorentz Driver can be difficult to fight against in PvP, so they've reduced the body shot damage against players by 20%, and this will also prevent it being a one-hit kill with Empowering Rift. Also, body damage reverts to the old behavior in the weapon's damage mode, and the precision damage in any mode is unchanged. Now, the Skyburner's Oath, guys, quite a niche, but what they've actually done, especially with the Airborne changes, might actually be viable. They've increased the aim down sight's projectile speed to 99999, so it's basically hit scan. Both aim down sights and hip fire are now 150 rounds per minute. The hip fire projectile no longer tracks but arcs similar to a grenade launcher and has a larger detonation size than ADS. The hipfire detonation also applies burn to targets, and the bonus range from the masterwork has been rolled into the base stats of the weapon. The masterwork now grants bonus reload speed instead. So this has the highest airborne effectiveness of any weapon in the entire game at 35. Moving on from there, last word, they've reduced the mouse and keyboard recoil penalty from 33% to 22%. Arbalist, they say it's more dominant in PvE than intended. It's so good. They've reduced the damage versus champions by 25%, but it'll still break barriers in one hit. So probably still going to see a lot of play, just a little bit less effective. Graviton Lance's Catalyst didn't help the weapon enough, so the Catalyst changed from granting Hidden Hand to granting Vorpal Weapon and Turnabout. Pretty interesting. The Grand Overture, not seeing any play, so they've reduced the time between bursts in the missile mode. Holding the trigger will now fire all missiles in a continuous burst. Tapping will fire a 5-round burst. Next up, the Cold Heart, which might become pretty darn good with that trace rifle buff. Remember, its damage increases and increases as you shoot a target, but its exotic ability of just like being a trace rifle feels a bit weird now that there's legendary trace rifles. So now, sustained damage creates an ionic trace, and collecting that ionic trace grants energy to all your abilities. And they increase the grace time before the damage ramp up goes away from 0.113 seconds all the way to 1 second. So this is definitely a weapon to keep your eye on next season. Prometheus Lens. The sustained damage applies a more useful burn to targets. For the Wave Splitter, the power level no longer cycles randomly. The default damage output is the same as the old middle tier, and then picking up an orb of power now grants 10 seconds of maximum power and caps at 20 seconds, up from 5 and 10, and it now suppresses targets while granted this mode by picking up an orb. So pick up an orb, more damage, and instant suppression? Yeah, Wave Splitter and 20% more damage against yellow bars? I'm very interested in this. Moving on from there, the Osteostraga's projectile, it's actually going to correct the rotation on the projectile model. The Lord of Wolves, they've reduced the damage fall off start and end by 20%. But then guys, holy crap, we're not done yet. I warned you this would be a long one. We then have perks. So, snapshot sights. They've increased the ADS animation and speed scaler 0.5, 0.75 for special ammo weapons, primary weapons unchanged. Opening shot has felt pretty mandatory on shotguns. So, what they've done is they've removed the damage fall off scaler. Now it increases the range stat bonus from plus 20 to plus 25. Other stats from this perk are unchanged, plus 20 to aim assist, reduced accuracy, cone angle, all of that stuff. Then for full choke, this has been the go-to magazine perk for forever. So they've increased the spread angle from 0.95 to 0.9625, so it narrows the spread a little bit less, so hopefully this will make some of the other, they say magazines, but they should say barrels, viable. Then the smooth bore, it's always felt awkward because it increases the spread that nobody wants, so they're buffing it a little bit. So they reduce the angle spread from 1.1 to 1.075, so it widens the spread a little bit less. And then Desperado is pretty nuts, obviously. So they've increased the fire recovery scaler from 0.4 to 0.7, so it doesn't fire as fast with the perk active. They've reduced the duration from 7 seconds to 6 seconds, and they've removed the PvE damage penalty. Then for Air Assault, this was shelved years ago, but it's coming back, and if you have an old perk with Air Assault, maybe it's time to whip it out because now it grants plus 60 airborne effectiveness when wounded, so same trigger as Eye of the Storm. Moving on from there, Mulligan never really felt very good, so they've increased the chance to return ammo from 20% to 35% on primaries, unchanged on special and heavies. Compulsive Reloader shipped a bit weak, so they've increased the reload stat buff from plus 40 to plus 50, and they've added a 0.95 animation scaler. Then Adagio was allowing for one-hit body shot kills with slug shotguns, so what? Then they reduced the damage for that on shotguns from 30 to 20% to prevent that. Now for mods, for Icarus Grip, obviously those are the changes because of airborne effectiveness. Whew! Pretty insane, guys. But there is a bit more. So Bungie talks about some of the weapons that you're no longer going to be able to get next season and actually the season after in season 18 in order to keep the loot pools limited so you can actually farm for what you want. So here are the weapons leaving loot pools at the start of season 17. So May 24th for Iron Banner, the occluded finality sniper rifle is going away. The finite impactor hand cannon is going away. Comedian shotgun and the palindrome hand cannon are going away. That's a big one. Palindrome is one of the best hand cannons in the game. For Trials of Osiris, the Shayura's Wrath submachine gun and the Messenger are going away. Definitely the Messenger, hugely popular weapon, so that's a big deal. And then the weapons leaving loot pools at the beginning of season 18, which is whenever that comes. The Peace Bond sidearm and the Archon's Thunder submachine gun are leaving, and the Plug 1 and the Hothead are leaving Nightfalls, and the Eye of Soul and the Summoner are leaving Trials. So definitely, if you see anything on that first list, especially the Palindrome, try to get a good one before the start of season 17, and then same with the season 18 list, try to farm those in season 17. But moving on from there, guys, there's actually a hotfix coming very soon, next Tuesday, April 26th, and here are the balancing changes included. So Axion Bolt base cooldown is increased from 91 seconds to 152 seconds. The Titan Barricade's base cooldown when Bastion is equipped is now 82 seconds, up from 53 seconds, and this matches the recharge rate of the Warlock Rift. Offensive Bulwark now provides 60% less grenade energy regeneration in PvP game modes. Whisper of Chains now provides 15% bonus damage resistance against players when near a stasis crystal, down from 25%, unchanged in PvE, thank goodness. The Renewal Grasps. While equipped, Renewal Grasps increases the base cooldown of the Dustfield from 62 seconds to 152 seconds, and the outgoing damage penalty applied to player victims in the Dustfield grenade is reduced from 50% to 20%, unchanged in PvE, thankfully. Unfortunately, I think the base cooldown is still going to be changed in PvE, but you know, those were quite a problem in the Crucible. Next up, guys, next week there's going to be a new Gambit Labs. This one is Moat Thief. So essentially, the original concept of the Invader was a Guardian as a taken terror, overpowered and dangerous, something new to have to fight. While this was very compelling, you know, there's some problems with it. So the normal moat drain from having 2 blockers is disabled in this mode. Instead, every second the Invader is invading, 1 moat drains directly from your bank to the Invader's bank. So now you're not invading to wipe the team, you're invading and then just trying to hold out and survive while the enemy hunts you down, which is pretty interesting. Moving on from there, we have some brand new Amazon Prime gaming loot. So we have the Tip of the Spear Exotic Sparrow, the Tall Tale Exotic Ship, the Drop Pod Legendary Ghost Shell, and the Taunt Dance emote, as you can see. And guys, moving on from there, I promise the last thing we're talking about today is a pretty big change to Trials of Osiris. This change was technically already implemented with the Tuesday hotfix, but obviously it comes into effect tomorrow with the first TWAB since that hotfix. So there's been a ton of feedback about the flawless pool. It's enabled Sunday morning, and frankly, no one wants to play in the flawless pool because you get matched with other people who have gone flawless. It was done to protect newer players and lower skill players, but obviously, like, if you do go flawless, you just don't want to play again when you're only matching other hardcore people. Okay, here's what's going to happen. Now, it's actually going to be worth it to play in the flawless pool, because now when the flawless pool is active, as long as you have 7 wins on your passage, at match completions, you have the chance to get adept loot randomly given to you, even if you have a loss on your passage. So that is huge, guys. And again, that means as long as you go flawless 1 time to unlock the flawless pool, you can then sit there and lose as much as you want. As long as you accumulate 7 wins total, every single match has the chance to let you just farm adept weapons. It's essentially like going flawless and continuing to play and not resetting your passage. You have a chance to get flawless loot, you know, with those matches, as long as you remain flawless after 7 wins. Now, again, with the flawless pool, the whole remaining flawless thing doesn't matter. You can lose as much as you want and still keep that passage and get adept loot. Really big change there. Going to be really interesting to see if this ups the trials numbers. So guys, that's it for the video. Hope you enjoyed and found this informative. If you did, please remember to help me out by simply rating and especially sharing this video. If you guys want to see more Destiny 2 content similar to this, don't be afraid to slap that subscribe button. If you want to get in touch with me and keep up to date with the latest channel activity, the best way is to follow me on Twitter at RickCacus, that is linked in the description down below. Again, I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, have a good day.